Hi students, in this video I want to review with you MLA in-text citations. In another video we'll review how to write works cited pages, but for now I want to focus on what you do inside your essay itself when you're acknowledging your sources. So let's review why we even bother with this. First of all, academic writing is a conversation, and we are often showing how we are adding to what others have said and acknowledging what others have said and then joining in that conversation ourselves. Also, credibility. We want to make sure that we are more believable, and so we cite the work of others to boost our claims. Also, we want to give credit where credit is due, of course. The authors that you have read have worked hard to produce their work, so we want to give them credit for their words and ideas. And then finally, we want to create a paper trail. The in-text citations are what lead us to the works cited page at the end of the essay. So we want to make our in-text citations really user-friendly for that purpose. MLA is a system of rules. It stands for Modern Language Association. So I realize that in other classes you may have been asked to use APA or Chicago style or even something else. In this class and in a lot of English and language classes, we use MLA format, and I think it's much easier. So let's just look at what we do. Well, first we'll look at when we do it. When we cite our sources, of course, you know that we cite a source when we use their words, right? Whenever we quote somebody, we want to both use quotation marks around the words that we've borrowed and then give them credit for those words. But we also want to give credit to our sources when we use their ideas. So if you're paraphrasing or summarizing, you also need to let us know where that material came from. So basically, any material that didn't come from inside your own brain, you have to cite. Again, that gives you more credibility and it gives the writers the credit for their work. What not to do? Well, I know you've heard a million times that you shouldn't plagiarize, right? So that's why we cite our sources carefully to give writers credit. And that's why we put quotation marks around words that come from other people. You also want to be careful not to misattribute your sources. In other words, you want to make sure that you are crediting the right people. If you accidentally credit Smith for the words of Garcia, that's misattribution. And then fabrication is when you simply invent things, when you make things up. That's a pretty extreme case, but obviously it's something that you shouldn't do. So let's review what in-text citations are called. They are often called parenthetical citations because they appear in parentheses at the end of the material that you've borrowed, whether it's words or ideas. And what we do is we cite the author's last name. If no author is listed, so for example, if it's an editorial or maybe some sort of blog entry, you might not have an individual author listed. So in that case, you would provide the title of that article in quotation marks, and that's still easy for your readers to find on the works cited list. And then you cite a page number if you have one. Okay, so here's an example of a quotation where the author's name is Fitzpatrick and the page number is Roman numeral 13. That information goes at the end of the sentence in parentheses. And notice that the period goes at the end after the closed parenthesis. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward, right? Often, though, you'll provide the author's name in the lead-in to the quotation, so you don't need to repeat it in the citation. We'll talk more about this later, but it's always a good idea to lead into your quotation with your own words so that they are smoothly introduced and they flow smoothly with your own voice. So a really nice thing about doing this is that you can show how credible your sources are. In this case, this is somebody who wrote a preface to the MLA handbook. So we're leading into it in her preface to the MLA handbook. Kathleen Fitzpatrick writes, so on and so on and so on. Now here we've already said her name within the sentence, so we don't repeat it at the end. Also, sometimes you won't have a page number. Web sources typically don't. If you do have a PDF or an actual print source, you'll have a page number to use. But if you're working with a website, you won't. So in this case, in this example, the author is Gibson. We've got the nice lead-in, we've got the quotation, we've put Gibson's name at the end with the closed parenthesis. So what this means is, if you give us the author's name in the lead-in to the quotation or paraphrase, and if there's no page number, you don't need a parenthetical citation at the end because you've given us all that we need. So in this last case here, we've got the lead into the quotation, and we've got the quotation itself. We've already said the author's last name, and there's no page number, so we don't need anything else at the end. Okay? So let's shift gears a little bit. Remember that when you quote, you need to quote accurately. You need to use the author's words exactly as they're written. There are two exceptions. One is if you feel that you need to change something inside of a quotation in order to make it clearer for your reader. So if your source is using a pronoun and you don't think your readers will know what the pronoun stands for outside of the context, you can change that word for clarity. In that case, you put brackets around the small change that you've made. Remember, you may not change what the quotation means, right? This is just to clarify it for your readers. If you want to make a quotation shorter without changing the meaning, you put ellipses dots, and notice that they're actually nicely spaced. So if you're very meticulous, you'll put spaces between those periods. Okay, and this is, again, what you do if you want to make your quotation more concise without changing the essence of the meaning. You also need to make sure that the grammar will hold up if you take out some of the words. Okay, so here is an example. In the original passage, as experts have noted, change is perhaps the one constant of contemporary academic life. In this first case, I have omitted the word contemporary. I don't know why one would need to do that, but in this example, we've got the ellipses dots. Obviously, I've highlighted them for emphasis, and you don't need to do that. Here, I have substituted the word college for academic and put that change inside square brackets, not parentheses, but brackets. Okay? All right. Let's talk about what to do when you have a source that has multiple authors. This often happens with scholarly journal articles in particular. So if you have a source with two authors, you simply use the word and to connect them. So if one author is Smith and the other is Garcia, you simply say Smith and Garcia. Now, if you have a source with more than two authors, then you'll use the abbreviation et al. This is sort of like etc. So in this example, if Smith and Garcia and Jones and all kinds of other writers have written the source, then you would use just the first author listed and this abbreviation. Okay, finally, sometimes your sources are going to quote other experts, and you like what those experts have to say so much that you want to use your source's source. And you can do this. Sometimes you want to go find that original source that's being quoted. That's a great thing to do. Look them up on the works cited list and search in one search for that source and find that. Otherwise, you have to give credit both to the person who said the quotation you want to borrow and the source where you found it, okay? So we use the abbreviation quoted in, QTD period, in, to indicate this. So let's go back to this source by Fitzpatrick that I have quoted in this little video before. She quotes somebody named William Riley Parker. And I really like this quotation, so I want to use it. So I'm giving Parker credit for his words. But then I'm also going to say quoted in Fitzpatrick so that I'm signaling where I found it, because Fitzpatrick is going to be on your works cited list, not Parker. So this does the job of leaving a paper trail to the works cited list. Okay, so that quoted in is going to be an essential tool for you, particularly in 102 research papers. Citing multiple sources. This is different from when it's one source with multiple authors. Often you're going to notice sources in conversation. You're going to notice that more than one author agrees on a particular point. It's a really great thing to do as a writer to show that you're noticing those connections in your sources. So if you're using material, if you're summarizing material from more than one source, you can cite those sources and use a semicolon to join them. So in this case, Gibson wrote one article and Rappaport wrote another article, and they are both going to be on your works cited list in separate entries. Okay, so the word and means two authors of the same piece, but the semicolon means authors of different pieces altogether. All right, so looking ahead, we're going to talk more in coming weeks about how you should not overdo quotations. Most of the writing should be your own. So use paraphrase if you think your quotations are starting to dominate your voice. And remember, as I've mentioned a couple times in this video, to smoothly introduce quotations with lead-ins. There's more on that in your nuts and bolts writing guide. All right, let me know if you have any questions at all. Feel free to ask on our discussion board or to send me an email. And I will talk to you soon.